Welcome to episode 4 of my podcast. Thanks for joining us, and hopefully you're gaining a little bit of information, some new insights, and some gold nuggets that you'll be able to implement into your business. Today, we'll be talking about common myths and mistakes to avoid. What I found in the brokerage world is that there's a lot of people that like to tout common practices and best practices that were developed years and years and decades ago. But really, they don't hold up nearly as well in today's market as they did 20, 25, 30 years ago, when the person that's telling you this information might have learned to implement it. Because at the end of the day, think of it this way. What worked in the pre-internet age might not necessarily hold up in today's day and age. It's kind of like asking your grandfather for dating advice. You're trying to find a date on Tinder, and grandpa's advice, well, let's just say it's not going to do so well, as he doesn't have an understanding of the modern perspectives of dating. So listening to someone that came up in the market 25 or 30 years ago, before the internet and before all the technology that we have currently in place, they might not understand what it's like to try to replicate that success if they had to do it in today's market. So join us as we start to talk about common myths and mistakes to avoid, because the most expensive commodity on earth, bar none, is time. It's non-renewable. You can never get the time back that you wasted trying something out that doesn't work in today's day and age. Stick around. Hope you enjoy.
Chapter 4, Common Myths and Mistakes to Avoid. Mistakes are expensive, so I try to minimize them. The first and foremost mistake is not prospecting enough. No new business means no old business. A sales pipeline is just like a water funnel. Put something in the top and something comes out the bottom. When you're talking to your prospects, if you're not putting enough new opportunities in the top of the funnel, you're never going to get enough out of the bottom. Now, the second mistake would certainly be limiting yourself to one particular property type, one geographical area, or farming only one submarket. Like I mentioned before, that comes down to an older method that people used to do, which might have worked years ago, before the age of the internet and availability of detailed information, but it no longer holds true. The third mistake is working with too many buyers or working on too many lease assignments. Those, I would say, are the top 3 mistakes commercial agents commonly make. The cost of old style farming. Old style farming, in air quotes, will cost you time. It'll cost you money. Like I mentioned, the most expensive resource is time. You can never ever get that back. Frankly, you won't be seeing the results that you want. I speak from experience. I tried for years to do a farming method. I'm very diligent about doing a database and collecting data and following up with phone numbers and email and so forth. I tried and tried and tried. It wasn't until I quit farming and adjusted my course just a little bit, while still investing the same amount of effort, that the outcome changed significantly. Think about it, folks. If you are told to do what everyone else is doing, doesn't it stand to reason that you're going to get the same average results as everyone else? So you need to do something that everyone else is not doing in order to get outsized results. Not prospecting enough. Not prospecting enough is the number one mistake for a bunch of reasons. Like I mentioned before, sales are like a funnel. You put X in the top, Y comes out the bottom. In a perfect world, you'd put X in the top and X would come out the bottom. But there's always going to be some amount of fall off. I see this so much with commercial real estate agents and residential agents on that side, for that matter. If you don't go out and make prospecting a part of your daily regimen, just like brushing your teeth, you wind up doing things the wrong way. Think of it this way. If you wanted to make a bottle of wine, but you only have one grape, you're never going to get enough juice out of that one to make a whole bottle. No matter how hard you squeeze, no matter how hard you twist it and turn it, it's never going to make enough. Similarly, it's like that old common turn of words, putting a square peg into a round hole. If that's the only option you have, then you're going to struggle the entire time trying to make something into something that it's not. If you think about it, the more you put into the top of the sales funnel, the more opportunity you give yourself, and the pickier you can be with whom you work with. You can see who is a higher probability client, and you can be more discerning over what types of clients you work with. You will be able to say, no, I don't want to take on this piece of business. That's a low probability client. That's a difficult person, or it's going to take too long. Prospecting diligently allows you to live in abundance. Imagine on one hand, if you were able to wake up every morning, go out looking for opportunities, and collect all the business cards of the people that you spoke to. Before long, you'd end up with a stack of 100 plus business cards, and you put that on a plate on your desk. Now, knowing that there's only 24 hours in a day, at this point, you get to choose which ones you work with, cherry picking only the best, most qualified leads. Now, contrast this with only having one business card on that same plate. You're going to have a much, much harder time. You're going to hold on to that business card for dear life. And if that person decides to do things that are not in your best interest, or they're difficult to work with, or they take too long, you have to deal with whatever comes out of that relationship. However, if you and your prospect every day and you create more opportunities for yourself, you're going to be able to have all the choices that you want. You'll be able to make the right decisions, not from a place of scarcity where you have to make that decision because you have a car payment or a house payment to make, but rather you have the luxury of at that point saying, what's the best thing for my business? What's going to allow me to grow? Maybe the answer to those questions is a different property type. Maybe it's a different submarket or even county. Whatever that might look like, you be able to make the right decisions for the right reasons because you want to or you choose to, not because you have to. That would be effective prospecting in a nutshell. Limiting yourself. The second mistake I see being made would be people limiting themselves to one property type or farming a submarket. I have a real issue with this. I think it came from the right place. Years ago, people wanted to be called specialists. Now, with the advent of all the information that there is out there on the internet, on CoStar and so forth, you can learn about multiple property types relatively easily. More importantly, I think people who really wanted to continue specialization are the owners of commercial brokerage firms. Hear me out. Let's say you had 30 brokers and you're in some city that has X number of commercial properties. At some point or another, if you don't create clear-cut guidelines in terms of what properties your brokers can work with, you're going to have brokers stepping on each other's toes, saying, oh, wait, that's my area. Wait, that's my property type. I think the whole concept of creating a small geographical area or just choosing one property type is the very definition of pigeonholing yourself. Having a deep breadth of knowledge can be done, especially if you're diligent about your work and you study the market and you study the trends and so forth. There's no reason why you can't be diligent and have a high level of understanding in multiple submarkets and in multiple property types. Again, I'm not sorry to blow the lid off it, but I think a lot of brokers and owners do that just because it avoids having their agents fighting over the same pieces of business. As I said, I used to do all these things myself, so I know from experience. In my backyard here, we had a 4% turnover rate for industrial properties. What does that mean? Only 4%, 4 out of 100 properties a year would sell in any given year. So let's say I created a relationship with Mr. Jones and Mr. Smith and Mrs. Diaz. I would need to have 100 of these relationships and nurturing them constantly to be able to make 4 sales this year. That's not very efficient. More importantly, to look at that inversely, your chances of selling any one property during any of those years, right, is 1 out of 25 in any given year. There are some people who own properties for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Oftentimes, commercial real estate is held multi-generationally. So there are reasons why people hand real estate down. There are certain tax incentives and so forth. Sometimes people own properties for 50 years. Now, I would not want to be knocking on someone's door every 3 months with coffee and donuts if they're not going to sell the property for 50 years or more. You with me? I'm going to be very old before I can make a commission check from that. And that's another reason, if you just have a relationship, the chances of you selling that building is not that great. I think it's very important to have a rapport. I think it's very important to nurture relationships. But I think it's overstated how important those relationships are when considering the pure statistical probability of transacting with that one individual. On the residential side, the average American moves every 7 to 10 years. So, there's about a 14% chance in any given year that a person's going to sell their house. It makes a lot more sense for that person. But when you have your chances 1 out of 25 in any given year as an agent, or 4% chance, I don't like those odds. Just like the example I gave earlier, I prefer to go after highly leveraged people. That means people who have a high chance of transacting in the next 3, 6, or even 12 months. For example, let's say you're a doctor. You just got out of med school and you want to help as many people as possible. Would it be more effective for you to go downtown and walk up and down Main Street and say, hey, are you sick? Hey, are you sick? Hey, are you sick? If you reach out to 4, 5, 600 people, you're going to find some people that are sick. There's no question. The law of large numbers dictates that eventually you're going to run into those people that are sick. But wouldn't it make more sense for you as a doctor if you were to sit down outside the entrance to the emergency room where all the ambulances are pulling in with people on stretchers who just got into car accidents, for instance, or people who are being admitted to the hospital, and you sit outside that door and you say, excuse me, sir, are you sick? Excuse me, ma'am, are you sick? That's the difference between the traditional method and the one that I teach. You are going after highly leveraged people, quote unquote sick people from the previous example, who have a high probability of transacting soon. The cost of too many buyers and leases. We all get the same 24 hours. That's just a fact. The question is, how effectively and how efficiently do you work within those 24 hours? Now, I'm not above working with somebody who's a buyer if I've already sold them a building. I made them, quote, homeless by selling the building that they're in. Sure, I have no problem selling them a building or doing a lease on a building that I own or that I sold for someone else. That's fine. However, if you're using that as a primary way of getting your business, frankly, there aren't enough hours in the day. The analogy that I've always heard and used is when you're dealing with sellers, the people from whom you get an exclusive right to sell their property, it's like going to the top of the mountain. For those of you that out there that are skiers or snowboarders, this example will really hit home. It's one thing to climb all the way to the top of the mountain. Working with a buyer is like climbing up the bunny hill. It's like climbing 1/10 of the way up the mountain, turning around and skiing down for a fun little ride. It might take you 30 seconds, but then you have to take off your skis or take off your snowboard, put it on your back, and huff and puff your way back up the hill to the top of the bunny hill. Dealing with sellers, on the other hand, is like walking all the way to the top of the mountain so that you can then ride down. Yes, it takes you longer, probably 3 or 4 times as long, but what happens along the way is magical. What happens along the way skiing down the mountain is that you get to pick up other business. People are calling you about 123 Main Street. It might not work for them, but then you can sell them your other listing at 234 Main Street. Or a qualified buyer is calling you about 123 Main Street, but guess what? You can refer them to an agent that you trust and make 25% when they buy something from that agent. People come to you and they say, oh wow, 123 Main Street? I have a building across the street. You obviously know a lot about this neighborhood. Let me go ahead and give you my listing to my building. Every single one of those outcomes has occurred because I made it my main focus to focus on representing sellers. It's far more efficient for the amount of time you're given. Maybe it takes 3 times longer to go out and find a listing and to prospect for sellers, but you get far more business. You experience a far bigger cumulative effect because of all the exposure you earn from working with sellers, the additional work that it gives you, and the reputation and branding that helps you build your business. It all comes together. When you're dealing with a building that you're selling, the only thing that has to happen for you to make money is someone has to buy that building. Now, sometimes another agent brings somebody, but a good part of the time, someone comes to you. They see you on LoopNet or CoStar, or they see your marketing or your email blast or what have you. They come to you. They want to buy the building directly from you. Oftentimes, when there isn't another agent involved, you wind up making twice the commission. The last time I checked, $2 is better than $1 for the same amount of work. Leasing, for the same reason, is time consuming. When you're working with buyers or people who are leasing, you have to take them and show them around, and show them around, and show them around. They like to play Goldilocks, like that children's fairy tale. They tell you, well, this one is to this one is to that. Some people decide not to buy, and then you've wasted all this time with them. Some people decide not to lease, and you'll have wasted all that time as well. There is no guarantee. And like I said, on the sales side, the only thing that has to happen is that a sale has to occur and you're compensated, whether it's half the commission or all of the commission. It just increases your probability. I like statistics because if you play the highest odds over and over and over again, you're going to wind up having the most successful business model and winning over and over and over again. Is it ever too late to correct your mistakes? It's never too late to correct your mistakes, but you do have to smack yourself on the wrist. I've heard people who, if they're trying a new behavior, they put a rubber band around their wrist to remind them, nope, don't do that. If you've already gone down these roads, you know what to do, you know, because you've already felt the pain. You don't want to waste all your time working with people who aren't going to transact. You don't want to work in an area where there's not enough deal flow or there are too many brokers in that area. You don't want to be in a situation where there's more month left at the end of your money. It can happen, but it's never too late to course correct. It's never too late to start a new business model. If you start doing the right things the right way, your business can look entirely different in 4 to 6 months down the road. It can look entirely different with some real concerted effort and the right activities in the right places.